10 guilds, 4 players. We're right near the maze's end, and right now we're going to see the semi-finals of Pro Tour Dragons Maze featuring Craig Wescoe and the Player of the Year, Josh Utter-Leyton. There's Craig Wescoe. He is off to the races with Judges Familiar on turn 1 against a mountain for the newly crowned Player of the Year from Team Channel Fireball, Josh Utter-Leyton. The Judges Familiar beats in for the first of what could be a blisteringly quick 20 damage as Craig Wescoe, with his lots of white weenie cards and some green, goes up against the Boros Blitz of Josh Utter-Leyton. BDM, Luis Scott Vargas with me here in the booth, your host Rich Hagan. What are we going to see, BDM?
Well, I talked to Josh Utter-Leyton at halftime, and he was, by his description, Craig Wescoe could mulligan to 5 all 5 games and still have a pretty good shot at beating him. He said the matchup here is worse for him than his matchup against Junya Ienaga at Worlds, which, Luis, you'll recall, was a pretty bad matchup.
Yeah, I actually lost to Junya twice in that tournament, though I did not lose to him in the top 8 because I didn't get to that far. But Junya did just, clear a path through all of us playing Tempered Steel.
So yeah, the green-white creatures are a little bigger than the red creatures. He's got, Advent of the Worm. He's got Loxodon and Smiter, and then after sideboard, things get terrible for Josh.
Yeah. Wescoe boards in like 13 cards, including 4 Armadillo Cloak, Unflinching Courage, and 4 Trostani. Yeah. So it is not going to be easy.
And right away, you see Wescoe has gone curve, curve, curve. 1 Judges Familiar, 2 Night Token of Selesnya, Charm, and 3 Let's use my mana pretty efficiently to run out of 3/3 center off Call of the Conclave. All Josh has on offer is a Gorehouse Chainwalker right now.
He's pretty happy with that trade, I would imagine.
Yeah, certainly.
It's going to have another one, 3/2. It gets unleashed, and now here's Foundry Street Denizen, the 1-drop. It becomes a 2/1 if you make another red spell that turn.
Yeah, Wescoe getting to be on the play, too, is pretty enormous, as you can imagine.
And he's going to be on the play throughout this top 8. He was the #1 seed.
Yeah.
So Wescoe, Familiar, 2/2. Gigantic Loxodon Smiter up next.
Wall of Elephant.
Yeah.
But it falls to a Mizzium Mortars.
Part of the reason Josh kept a hand without a 1-drop, which is rare, is that he had multiple Mizzium Mortars in his hand. So that is going to go a long way. Though if Wescoe hits a 4th land here and can play Advent of the Worm, it's going to be pretty tough for Josh to fight through that.
Wescoe untapped. Will he find land number 4? He will. That is a huge deal because 5/5 Trampler is on the not too distant horizon.
Possibly 2 5/5.
Yeah, and he's going to follow it up with the Rootborn Defenses afterwards. I mean, he does have the option of just playing a Militant this turn, then playing Rootborn Defenses and making a Centaur, which is also very good when Josh goes to attack. So
why wouldn't you just go, hey, I've got a 5/5 Trampler? What's the case for the other way?
You get more blockers out, just because now Josh has 3 attackers. I think it looks like by attacking with both creatures, he's more likely to play the Militant and the Rootborn Defenses, which is looks like what he's doing. Legion Loyalist is really huge for Josh, though. Blanking creature tokens on defense is pretty amazing. But I think with Josh at 6 and Wescoe at 11 too, he can afford to be maybe a little more aggressive and just play the Worm, because the Worm is bigger. But the Militant is certainly the safer play, just by having additional blockers. He also could have left Judges Familiar back to block Foundry Street Denizen. But either way, I don't think Josh is beating a Rootborn Defenses or an Advent of the Worm this game, unfortunately for him. Like, he can't not attack with the Chainwalkers. I mean, he might not attack with both, but he certainly has to send at least one in. Just because if he doesn't attack, they can't block, and he's losing the race pretty badly.
Is there any situation where you would consider leashing them?
He could. The problem is if you're leashing them, you're putting yourself on the back foot, and that's just not a game you can win. Like, not very easily, at least.
You can see lots of creatures in play in this game. There's only one non-land permanent in the other semi-final. That's Dusty Ochoa with a Jace Architect of Thought in the Esper Control Mirror against Makihito Mihara of Japan.
Yeah, so this is interesting here, because Josh is pretty sure Wescoe has Rootborn Defenses. The question is, can he beat it anyway? And if the answer is no, he needs to attack, regardless of whether he thinks it's like an 80% chance that Wescoe has it. I don't think it's unreasonable not to attack, but I think either way, if he thinks his chances of beating root board defenses are really low, you're probably better off running into it, even though you're pretty aware that he's got it.
Well, the other option is other two options are to do nothing.
Yes.
Or to play Mizia Mortars to draw it out, but that seems terrible as well.
Well, he drew a medic, so he can play that to block 1 Centaur token, but then he has to block Foundry Street Denizen on Dryad Militant and go to 2. So, I mean, he would have a shot there. Like I said, either way, Josh is like pretty far behind, and right now he's just deciding how. So he decided he could not beat rootborn defenses, and as it turns out, he's not going to be able to.
So there we are.
So all of his creatures are indestructible.
Yeah, he just eats the 2 Chainwalkers for free.
And now there's a 1/1 in play for the aggro deck on the right of screen. And all the power and toughness in the world on the left.
Yeah, I mean, Josh isn't dead this turn, but he goes to 2 and is facing down 2 creatures with an Advent coming into play too.
I believe it's referred to as mostly dead.
More than mostly. Is he dead, or really dead?
Frontline Medic will get in the way, vaguely, so will Foundry Street Denizen a bit. And the damage will keep on ticking by for Craig Wescoe, who is moments away from a 1-0 lead here in the semi-finals of Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. Josh will untap, but...
He could have traded for a Centaur.
Yeah, I mean...
Wanted to keep something going for himself.
Yeah, like, it is reasonable to do that. The Boros deck does want creatures in play more, but I think Advent of the Worm is gonna finish things off.
Josh will let the 5/5 Trampler hit play. He just nods to that. Craig Wescoe untaps. Maybe he won't attack. Who knows?
Top 8 of a Pro Tour.
Weirder things have happened in this tournament for Channel Fireball players.
Yeah, that is certainly true.
But not this time. Craig Wescoe leads by 1-0. Pro Tour qualifiers for Pro Tour Theros, they have begun. You could be on the big stage for Pro Tour Theros taking place October the 11th through 13th in Dublin. For more information, visit wizards.com/PTQ. That is going to be such a great Pro Tour. So much fun. So Craig Wescoe leads by 1-0. What we're going to do is we're going to try and take a look at the sideboard potential strategies. If you were with us before the start of Game 1, we did kind of warn you that Wescoe has quite the suite to come in. But we'll get a look as we get the chance at those 2 sideboard strategies for the players. Josh Utter-Leyton knows he's really, really up against it. Nothing we saw in Game 1 suggests anything else. Almost by definition, the other semi-final, Makihito Mihara against Dusty Ochoa, much more evenly matched because it is more or less a mirror match Esper control. Maybe that gives Mihara the edge on experience.
Yeah, Mihara also has Debtor's Pulpit and Nightveil Spectre, both of which are pretty impactful. The Spectre especially, that was, in our Esper deck, by far the best sideboard card we had. We wished we played more. So Mihara, if he can land one of those on turn 3, the game is over very quickly.
Yeah, and we know that Dusty Ochoa didn't go over the top of the Debtor's Pulpit with the Destroy the Evidence tech.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty sweet reaction.
So just saw an interesting tweet from Reed Duke, who finished 9th in this event. And he said, on top of it all, I reached 100 lifetime pro points in time to get the honor of voting for my hero, LSV, into the Hall of Fame this year.
Yeah.
Hashtag best 9th place ever.
I saw that. That was a good thing to wake up to. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Just talk amongst yourself, Louise. Are you going to vote for this guy? Do you think? I mean, it's like a Pro Tour champion. It's not like he has 10 Pro Tour top 8s or anything. What do you think? Do you think we should?
I think we should. One of the questions is certainly what do you think about Mihara for a Hall of Fame?
Just before we do that, by the way, we have the sideboards for you. So let's take a look at the utter abomination that Craig Wescoe may be about to perpetrate upon the life total of Josh Utter-Leyton. Luis, talk us through the misery.
So if you look at Glaring Spotlight and V2 Gazi Guildmage, those are the only cards he might not board in. Everything else is on the table, and I would imagine, I mean, for sure he's boarding in the 4 Unflinching Courages and Tristanis. The Druid's Deliverances, I imagine, are for this matchup, and Gift of the Orzhova as well. I mean, Wescoe's the only card that I think you really wouldn't want in your deck. Judge's Familiar does not seem outstanding in this particular matchup.
No.
And maybe, I don't even know what past that. Like, he doesn't have very many bad cards in the main deck either. Like, Celestia Charm is not incredible because it makes a token, and you do kind of want to stay away from those against Loyalist, figuring that if Tristani's in play, you're usually doing well.
I'm trying to be optimistic here. Is there a way in which having Tristani bringing in could backfire in terms of it does cost 4 and you draw 2 of the 4 in your opening hand, you have 3 land, maybe you're not going to get there, and Josh can just kind of sneak in underneath a clunky draw that has multiple creature enchantments that cost 3, so, Tristani at 4. Is that... Tristani does seem like it costs a fair amount against an aggressive deck that, as you said in the quarters, Luis, wants to go 1, 2, 3, and on the play, Tristani seems a long way off.
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest risk here. And for that reason, I wouldn't be surprised if Wescoe's shaving some number of Advent of the Worms.
Sure.
But comparing the two cards, Tristani doesn't get blanked by Legion Loyalist, is a 2/5, survives Mortars, which I guess the Advent does also. But if you untap with it, even if you don't have either tokens, you're gaining a couple life every turn.
And if he's bringing in the Druid's Deliverance, that's like a time walk in this matchup.
Yeah.
And Unflinching Courage just undoes a lot of damage very quickly. Put that on a Loxodon Smiter, and things are kind of filthy.
Yeah, you can. Wescoe can be pretty far behind and still come back with a bunch of these cards.
So let's take a look at Josh Utter-Leyton's sideboard. It is not going to... The cupboard's not quite so well stacked in this particular matchup. Let's take a look at what Josh Utter-Leyton has to work with.
He's got Boros Reckoner, which is actually a pretty good card. It battles bigger guys and smaller guys with ease and kind of lets Josh get in there. Active Treason can also be pretty good. It's very good against Unflinching Courage because unlike the original Armadillo Cloak, Unflinching Courage works for whoever's controlling the creature.
Right.
And then Arrest also answers Unflinching Courage very well. So Josh does have some good options here, but I still suspect that Wescoe had a better main deck for the matchup and is boarding in a little more effective.
And to Rich's point about Craig Wescoe and clunky draws, 3s are a little rougher on Josh Utter-Leyton's deck than maybe 4s even are on Craig's.
Yeah, definitely true. Josh has a couple less land and a lower curve. And I don't actually know if Josh can bring in all 8 of those 3-drops without tinkering with some of his own 3-drops. The Legion's Initiative is not really a 2-drop anyway, so cutting that isn't raising the curve by too much.
Got a little look at Craig Wescoe's opening hand for game 2, and he's sitting there with a couple of land only, both Temple Garden, but all 5 of his other cards can be cast with the 2 land. So he is going to be pretty quick out of the gates. Also, I can tell you, in the other semi-final, it was an Aetherling War, and Dusty Ochoa won it. So he leads Makihito Mihara of Japan by 1-0.
Yeah, Dusty could be pulling off somewhat of an upset. Just because Mihara has a ton of Pro Tour top 8s, has played a lot longer.
This is his 4th top 8, and he's a former world champion.
Yeah, so Dusty being up 2 has got to be feeling pretty good for him.
But I think if you're at home and you're a PTQ grinder, you've got to be pulling for Dusty Ochoa. He's like, at this point, the patron saint of the PTQ grinders, right?
Yeah, made a Pro Tour debut in Atlanta, 2005. Team event, in fact. And we are away in game number 2, and Josh Utter-Leyton is in business with Unleash.
18.
And Wescoe will take 2 in order to put his Experiment 1 onto the battlefield. So a free shock for Josh Utter-Leyton, which might turn out to be relevant later in the game. So as we see the Loyalist, and Wescoe wants to take a little look at this.
So Josh is on a 1-lander here. If he draws a second land, his hand is amazing because he has double Emissary into Fire Fist Striker.
Wow.
But he's going to need to draw it either this next turn or the one after that to have a good shot.
Feel a little greedy here, not blocking the...
Yeah, I mean, Wescoe's hand does have a ton of tokens in it. I'm kind of surprised he didn't block the Loyalist there. He might be
triggered.
Oh, he
okay,
hasn't.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll trade.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was what Wescoe wanted
Okay,
to do.
yeah.
But Josh can't not attack there, I think, because Experiment 1, once it grows, it just blanks it anyway. So
Wescoe's drawn essentially dead for that turn. It was an Advent of the Worm that went into hand, but he's going to lay a second land. Now, of course, that Temple Garden, if he wants to, he can play it tapped, and then... is he going to take another 2 points of damage? That 4 damage in the first 2 turns, just for free, seems pretty extensive. And so he decides to step himself back a little and just play Experiment 1.
But he's going to take 2 damage anyway.
yeah, I think playing the Call of the Conclave there, since it prevents the 2 from the Cackler, does let Wescoe curve
better.
out if he draws a 3rd land, because then he can play Experiment 1 plus Voice.
And boom, and boom,
And there we have it.
Tick, 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 boom. That's the blitz bit of the Boros, boys and girls.
Go.
Well, Wescoe is drawing a bunch of 4-mana cards now, so this is one of Josh's paths to victory.
So here is the Clunk, and you see the Gift of Ord's Over that he draws there. That's dead. The Advent of the Worm is dead right now. Call of the Conclave and Voice of Resurgence are most certainly not.
Yeah, though Josh will lose his Fire Fist Striker this turn, most likely blanking the Voice of Resurgent from blocking. So he gets a bunch of damage in, but it's going to make the attacking next turn a little bit more difficult. Though drawing an Act of Treason is very good.
Oh, wow. So, smash. You cannot block Voice of Resurgence. You want to put your 2/2 Experiment in the way.
Yes, I will block here.
I will block here. Sure. 2, 4, 6 comes through. Wescoe falls to 8. And out comes the Unleashed Gorehouse Chainwalker.
This is kind of where Boros wants to be. If he draws a land, it's good. If he draws a spell, he can cast it. I mean, unless he
and
draws
there's
another 3.
Tristani. A 4-mana Tristani is
Yeah.
the draw for Craig Wescoe.
His best play here, is just play Call of the Conclave. You really want to have a token into play when you play Druid's Deliverance, and he's not dead on board this turn
Still
unless he
showing
draws
2
Act.
Temple Gardens in his hand, but those are not there. They're in play.
Ooh, drawing a 3 is Josh's nightmare scenario there, because now he doesn't actually even have a good attack, whereas Wescoe is just dead to a land.
So he can-
Still, a bunch of things have to happen here for Craig to stabilize in this one.
Yeah, Josh is debating now whether he wants to basically trade Chainwalker for Voice and throw a 2/2 for 4 damage, but because of the Act of Treason in hand, he doesn't really want to do that.
So it wasn't a land for Craig Wescoe, but it was something useful. It was another Call of the Conclave, so another 3/3 can come down, which is exactly what's going to happen.
Go.
So Josh really hoping for a land here. Foundry Street Denizen not quite. Though, even if the board does clog up a little more, Frontline Medic then starts to do work. So
Right.
then it just lets Josh Alpha Strike every turn without any fear of consequences.
Still no land for Craig Wescoe. He began with 2, he still has 2.
But 2 Druid's Deliverances is...
Yeah. I think if he attacks here with a Centaur, it's kind of telegraphing the Druid's Deliverance. Not that that's wrong, but Josh has to be thinking of what Wescoe could have to make an attack into this board. Like, even the fact that he's thinking about the attack does,
Yeah.
I think, give Josh some clues, especially once Wescoe doesn't then play a creature.
Is there a way to think about that without giving anything away to Josh? Like, does he...
Honestly, Wescoe would have had to think about this before his turn, because if he thinks for a long time, then just doesn't do anything, that also telegraphs it. So if he wanted to conceal his hand, what he could have done is just draw his card and just pass immediately, but that he would have already had to know what he wanted to do at that point.
16. Yep.
It's the Voice of Resurgence that's going to go in and drop Josh to 16. Wescoe is at 8.
Interesting, Josh brought in the first blades. I did not think that those were for the green matchup, but he obviously knows the Boros deck a lot more than I do.
I guess the thing is, apart from anything else, what it does do, the first blade, is the turn it arrives,
Yep.
it not only matches, it outfights a 3/3 Centaur.
Yeah,
Is Craig just going to populate at the end of the turn here?
he might. He has so many spells in his hand, he's never going to cast all of them anyway. So I think making a Centaur
End steps.
kind of hedges against drawing a
Boost
land,
Deliverance, populate. Yep.
And then maybe he tricks Josh into...
thinking he only had the one.
He only has the one. Yeah.
That is also very relevant.
Now, there is land number 3 for Wescoe.
Now he's probably going to the skies with a 4/4 lifelink Centaur.
Yes. So Mizium Mortars would be pretty decent.
A Legion Loyalist.
Legion Loyalist would also be very good.
Pretty sweet here.
Oh, there's the mortars. So
Yeah.
Josh is now in the game again.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty clutch. And he must be pretty happy that wasn't an unflinching courage.
Let's make this guy dead, shall we?
But still cannot attack.
No, but if he draws a land, he can play frontline medic and then start doing
yeah.
so. Wescoe's still really needing that 4th land.
We get a look at Josh Utter-Leyton's hand. We see he's got a Legion's Initiative, an Active Treason, and a frontline medic.
I think it's a Viashino first blade, actually.
Oh, it is. Yeah, you're right. It is a Viashino first blade. We saw that.
Yeah, my guess is
Maybe
that
the spotter also didn't think he was going to bring in the
Yeah.
Viashino first blade.
Yeah, he was making a judgment call.
Ironically, though, that 4th land for Wescoe, if he'd had it, might have been good for Josh, because with 4, Wescoe presumably would be thinking about Advent of the Worm, which would be great to Active Treason. Whereas as it is, with 3 mana, he's kind of going, well, here's another guy that you have to get past, and I've still got mana up for my Druid's Deliverance. Right now, it's really hard to see Josh's way past, and maybe an Advent of the Worm might have been able to do that for him.
Yeah, though I think Wescoe would have likely played the Tristani first just to make 5 life off the Advent.
Sure.
But either way, the Advent would give Josh a much better shot of stealing a game with Active Treason.
Reminded that Dusty Ochoa leads Makihito Mihara of Japan by 1-0 in their Esper Control mirror match. Of course, you'll see plenty of their semi-final as the afternoon goes on here in San Diego.
Looks like Josh is starting to think about whittling down.
Yeah, he can't just take damage forever. The
Craig's
first couple
board.
attacks, it's easy just to like take it. But right now, he can't just.
Just thump
yeah.
yourself in the chest. And it's a 1-for-1 trade
12
for
your
him.
time.
Yeah, I mean it's not too bad.
Yep.
And the Burning Tree costs 0 mana, so there was that. Yeah, I'm not sure if Josh has ever won a 3rd land more, but
Yes. There's a distressing symmetry to that hand that doesn't parallel the board.
yeah.
This time. Yep.
Chainwalker does get to now attack now that Voice is tapped. Trading for a Voice is generally puts you in a pretty bad spot, but trading for a Centaur is fine.
And does Craig want to use his Druid's Deliverance?
Most likely not, but he might want to fire it off in anticipation of a 4th land, but I think planning for not drawing the 4th land is a little safer. Since if you draw a 4th land, I think you're pretty favored anyway. But he might actually, with Josh at 10 and having an Unleashed guy and just
No blocks.
2 small guys,
After blocks.
yeah, I guess he's just going to want to just make a 2/2 experiment 1, make another Centaur, and start attacking with everything.
Resolve.
And Josh will say, here's a Burning Tree Emissary, but without the explosive, I won't say explosive impact because that'll confuse people, but without anything further.
And there is land number 4.
Yeah,
So now we're back into choice mode for Craig Wescoe. As you said, Luis, he has this choice of, is he going to run out the Trostani first, or does he just want to get the game done? And he goes, well, I'm going to beat you about the head a bit, then I'm going to throw in this 5/5 Trampler. And you like the Trostani play, right?
I think it's a little safer. He might be aggressive enough that he wants to just run out the worm, but I think if he like runs out the worm to evolve Experiment 1, Active Treason is pretty bad. So yeah, it looks like he's just Trostaniing.
Resolve. Yep.
Actually, now that Trostani's out, Wescoe's just completely changing his strategy, which
Yeah.
makes sense, because if he untaps with Trostani, he's just not going to
Right, he
lose.
just puts the brakes on and
So-
says, "Can't."
So I think that Josh now has to kind of ponder the hopelessness of the situation, unfortunately for him. The fact that Trostani's a 2/5 blocker, too, is pretty brutal.
So Josh is kind of looks like he's lining up the heroic last stand of let's hurl everything at a red zone and watch you fail to read any of the numbers on my cards. Or?
Yeah, I mean, that just doesn't quite work. So now
Nope.
he's got to just play it out, though his chances of winning are fairly...
Oh,
Yeah.
there is the unflinching courage.
Yeah, now that Advent of the Worm is a 5/5 Thragtusk, then I think that makes things a little tougher.
Attack base.
So Wescoe saying, I'm just going to pop in with these two. I'm going to keep my defenses very thorough.
Yeah, he's got to be feeling fairly safe behind the walls of all his other creatures and the 5 life from the Worm token. Like, even a Legion Loyalist probably is not enough at this point.
So Josh, hand poised over the score pad, looking at just how far from death he's going to be.
It is not the pen trick.
No.
Oh,
No, it is not. He's now thinking of whether like he can just take it, then peel Legion Loyalist for the win, assuming Wescoe has nothing. Unfortunately for him, Wescoe does have the Nightmare scenario, which is summoning a worm and 5 life in one package.
now you can tell us this, Luis, because no one's listening. Is Josh Utter-Leyton someone who has those kind of tricks? Is he a mind gamesy player? He always struck me as the most straight-ahead guy I've almost ever seen play.
Yeah, he generally does not
No, that's what I
does not employ the Bush League shenanigans.
Okay.
You don't regenerate here, right? You just kill one of these guys.
Yeah, I think he's fine just trading for, and also the less creatures on the board, the better for Wescoe. It
Yeah.
just lessens the chances of something, exciting happening. He doesn't want excitement. He wants the game
Yeah,
to progress the way it's going.
After blocks. Advent. Gain 5. Evolve.
Oh, or he could evolve it and kill both of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes him a little more vulnerable to
So
active treason, but the
both
fact that
these
it's
guys
still not even close to lethal
center
makes it fine for him.
7.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming board position for Craig Wescoe. He has all the answers. He has the advantage in life.
This is a choose your own adventure, but they all go to the same page.
Turn to
Someone
64.
tore the last page of the book out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh is now playing because it's Pro Tour top 8, and if this was anywhere else, I think he would be packing up the cards. He might. There is strategic reason to keep playing. If Wescoe, like for example, plays another card, he gets to see more of what he boarded.
Absolutely.
Not that it's a huge surprise, but it's still free information. Like
Sure.
now he knows that Wescoe boards an unflinching courage. Probably pretty surprising.
And there's a significant smash, and that is the game, and it's kind of going as we thought. Craig Wescoe leads by 2-0.
Probably a different game if you hit your second land right away.
Yeah.
You can play Magic at a store near you every Friday. Earn Planeswalker points and battle against your friends in Friday Night Magic. May's F&M promo card is Craig Wescoe. No, it's Judge's Familiar. Visit wizards.com/F&M to find a store near you. I think those Judges Familiars are going to get very, very popular quite soon if Wescoe continues the way he's going. But we're going to turn our attention to the other semi-final. Hi, everyone. We're going to head back to see Makihito Mihara against Dusty Ochoa, where the score is 1-1. We had Aetherling War Game 1, which is kind of what you expect, and then we had Sin Collector Beatdown from Mihara to even things up. So we're down to the best of 3 in that one. But Luis, what we've seen so far doesn't look like there's a way back for Josh.
Yeah, I mean, he's not out. Like, you can be down 0-2 in a horrible matchup
Yeah.
and still win.
I mean, Luis's matchup in Berlin was considered nigh unwinnable.
Yeah, I played 10 games against Paul the night before when he was playing Kenny Obrig's Tez Raider list against Elves, and I won 1 of the 10, and then I went to sleep. But even though that's the case, and I ended up coming back that game, Josh has still got a pretty uphill battle here. I mean, it's Magic; anything can happen, and certainly, he was a land away from winning that game. But he's gonna have a tough road ahead of him.
Right. Well, it's a little different, right? You guys were playing 2 very different kinds of decks there. In this case, they're both playing along very similar axes.
Yeah.
And Wescoe just trumps him on almost everyone except for Legion Loyalist.
Yeah, Legion Loyalist and Burning Tree Emissary are the 2 main differences, because
Sure.
Emissary
And the
lets
mana,
Josh
yeah.
have insane draws, but in general, being slightly bigger is better. And when they're both aggro decks and one has slightly larger creatures or vastly larger creatures, it's in their favor.
Right, mid-range always trumps like Sly, right?
Right.
Okay, let's take you to Game 3 of the semi-final between Dusty Ochoa of the United States and Makihito Mihara of Japan. There you see the players. Mihara on the left, Ochoa on the right, and we are go. And remember, this is basically an Esper control mirror match. It's not quite 75 for 75, but you're going to see lots of battles over cards like Etherling, one of the real standout cards from Dragon's Maze at this Pro Tour. And just a second land from Mihara with just 1 mana open. Azorius Charm's just going to get cycled by Ochoa.
Yeah, Mihara just drew a Sin Collector, which is always a pleasant sight, regardless of how many you may have had in your hand.
3rd mana for Ochoa and pass. To what extent is this matchup a kind of what the old school players would call draw-go?
It's actually pretty reasonably so in the first bunch of turns, because the first person to blink, if they get their spell syncopated and then a Jace comes down for the other player, it's really bad for them. So you're going to see a lot of land passes until someone runs out of lands and or has collected enough Sin Collectors and wants to make a stand.
Well, take a look at Mihara's hand, what he has to work with.
So yeah, Mihara is going to probably at some point set up Sin Collector plus Dispel.
Which spell?
But then he's vulnerable to a Jace still. So if he has enough mana, he's just going to keep playing lands until he can cast Psychic Strike as well.
And then let's take a look on the other side of the table at Dusty Ochoa's hand.
Yep, they both have a bunch of counters, and they're both not tapping out for their Sin Collectors, or in Dusty's hand also a Jace. He may want to run Sin Collector here with Psychic Strike up.
That looks like what's happening, because Watery Grave says, why would you take the 2 points if you weren't going to do precisely that? Here it is, Sin Collector. And Mihara now, is he going to give away all the information, plus either a sorcery or an instant, or is he going to fight?
He's got a Psychic Strike here, because even though it just trades, which could happen anyway, he doesn't want Dusty to see his hand. That information is way too valuable, because then Dusty would know he could just play the Jace.
And then why doesn't Dusty counter back?
Because of also a Jace, basically. Like, it's the same. They're both thinking the same thing, and they both don't want to. Like, Jace is the most important card in the first 8 turns or so. So now Mihara's firing off his own Sin Collector, which Dusty is going to also try to counter. And now Mihara might actually want to fight back, since he can't counter a Jace anyway.
So then we see the Dispel from Mihara.
Taking his last Psychic Strike, but giving him a window to resolve Jace.
And now we see that there is Psychic Strike and just Jace plus 2 land. And that Jace, which is currently on the battlefield, pretty shortly is probably going to be on the battlefield for real.
And this is why Sin Collector is so sick. Mihara can't, or Dusty can't just play Jace and -2 it. Otherwise, the Sin Collector will collect his dues.
Yeah.
So he's got to play Jace and plus it unless he's worried. He drew a Revelation, which makes it a more of an option to plus Jace. But you still don't, or minus Jace. You still don't really want Sin Collector just eating the Jace, because then Mihara can play his own Jace and it just gets much more messy. So he is keeping it immune.
Yep.
Oh. So game 2 was about Sin Collector beatdown. Right now, Mihara has Sin Collector in play again. He's going to aim it at Jace.
The Ghost Council was a pretty sick draw from Mihara. The pressure is definitely on now.
18.
Obstinate Ghost Council gets exiled. It will be back.
And what does the Esper deck do against Ghost Council?
It's funny, because their best answer is far away or their own Ghost Council, and Sin Collector, conveniently enough, protects you from far away very well. So now he's got to minus the Jace, because it's just going to die to Ghost Council anyway.
And nothing good coming there, other than the fact that doesn't need to worry about 3 land anymore, but nonetheless.
Dusty is going to get to resolve a large Sphinx's Revelation if he just goes for it here, which I imagine he's got to.
Right?
Yeah. Waiting does himself no favors.
So it's Revelation for 5.
Well, Mihara still can't counter it, so that's not bad, but
20.
I think if he's forced to cast it, then he would have wanted to main phase it, even though he may have had to discard a card there.
So Mihara draws. Plenty of options ahead on the board right now.
You hunt.
Just drew a Sin Collector.
This is forcing the issue one way or the other.
So let's take a look, shall we? No, how about I'd like 5, please?
Yeah. 19.
Yep, that's fine. You go back up to 19. And Dusty Ochoa will refill his hand, presumably with things that Sin Collector will want to get rid of, at least in part. So let's take a look. There's a Sphinx's Revelation. A ton of land. Goodness me, what a ton of
Wow.
land. Is that 6 land and a Dispel?
Yeah.
Miserable, miserable.
Yeah, that hand's okay when you get to keep the next Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, but now that the Sphinx Revelation is going down, it's going to be pretty tough for Dusty to come back here.
Yeah, and his Jace is falls. He takes a big hit from the Obsidian Ghost Council. And there's a Parison Collector's waiting for him next turn.
I know you want to see your land when you're in a control mirror, but not this much.
Yeah. I mean, his best draw, Dusty's best draw was another Ghost Council to trade for Mihara's, but at this point, I don't even know if that will save him because he missed this turn. He's going to take 11 damage or, or what have you.
22.
Yeah, plus another 2 trade, so 22-12. 9 on the board.
And that's not even, it's not even counting the fact that Mihara has double Revelation and is about to draw a bunch of cards.
Yeah.
So, one thing I do like about this control mirror, though, is like it's actually fast.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this is not a slow, clumsy control mirror.
Yeah, I mean, just the cards are so high impact that they actually do end the game once they resolve, even if the first 5 or 6 turns not much happens.
Dusty down to 3 in heaps of trouble. And moments from now, that table's going to look a lot clearer. I confidently
Does this count as Sin
predict.
Collector beatdown?
Yeah, this is.
This is Sin Collector beatdown, yes. And Makihito Mihara is going to be very shortly. There we are, 1 game away from the Pro Tour Dragon's Maze final. My colours, my guild, my shirt. Proclaim your allegiance today by purchasing your guild apparel at mtgmerch.com. Obviously, they used the coverage team for the models for those shirts through the weekend, and I'm sure you've all been thinking how glorious we all look in them. Possibly. So we're going to go back to the front match. That's Josh Utter-Leyton against Craig Wescoe, of course. And Wescoe well and truly in the box seat, but there's a reason we play the matches out. And Josh Utter-Leyton will feel that as long as he has life, he will give it a whirl. He's already had a fantastic weekend. He will be the US World Magic Cup captain. He will be the player of the year. He was platinum weeks and weeks ago, but he would dearly love to be a Pro Tour champion.
How badly did Josh want to be the player of the year?
I don't know. We never really talked about it because Player of the Year is a lot more abstract than being like the World Magic Cup captain,
Yeah, absolutely.
or hitting platinum or being in the Players Championship. 2 of those things Josh had locked up going in here. But I mean, I'm gonna have to see how he feels about it. Like, he was far enough behind Ben that it was more, and definitely Yuya, that it was more of a that would be nice sort of thing than like a goal.
I can tell you, I went and talked to him shortly after he'd done an on-air interview in which Player of the Year was not mentioned. His eyes were wide with 4 rounds to go. He knew Ben S was out. He knew Yuya was in trouble. He saw it and wanted it.
Speaking of in trouble, Wescoe comes out. Wait there. Wait.
Oh, hello.
Almost the 3rd emissary.
So
that
let's
you've
have-
been waiting to see on camera.
Indeed, Trips Emissary, but it's double. Burning Tree, Gorehouse, Chainwalker. That's 7 power of damage on turn 2 from Josh Utter-Leyton here in Game 3. Currently up against an Experiment 1. But Wescoe, as we know, can change things around very quickly, and he's looking to do so right now with a Voice of Resurgence on his 2nd turn.
Oh, that was an insane draw. Frontline Medic means that Josh can just wait a turn and just start smashing into Wescoe's team without even worrying.
So there it is.
16. Your turn.
And this is how it begins. It begins with kind of just everything curving out, everything looking perfect.
Yeah, so even Wescoe's very good draw of Experiment 1 into Voice into Militant plus Centaur,
Yeah.
not actually match up well against Frontline Medic attacking with everything.
And he can't really interact terribly well with Josh's creatures. He can only really operate
No.
against life total.
Presumably, though, what you do is you just sit there and you take one gigantic hit. You leave all your 4 creatures in play, and then you start going, I've got Druid's Deliverance, hopefully, and I actually get to keep my guys there.
Well, let's see what he's got.
Yeah, let's take a look, because it feels like you can take one hit no matter how big it is within, obviously.
He's got
not
the
literally,
forests
but
and the trees here.
Yeah, so I think he does need to draw either Druid's Deliverance
Yeah.
or Unflinching Courage in order to get to a point where he actually can race. But currently, they both have an equal number of cards in hand, just about, because Wescoe does not really need the 5th and 6th land.
Josh draws. He's got Mountain and Mizian Mortars now.
It might even be worth just firing off mortars onto the Centaur token, just to make it so Wescoe has one less blocker for burning trees. But it depends how worried Josh is about mostly Wings Leader Zova, because Unflinching Courage goes on a 3/3 and you can't mortars anyway. So yeah, he's just gonna, looks like just go for it.
No thought at all to getting to 6 mana.
I mean, he might, like, he is on 4 right now, which is not incredibly far away, but the game is unlikely to last that long.
And here you go, as predicted.
Boom. Worth noting that the Dried Militant exiles the mortars. Actually not, that doesn't it doesn't do anything. But I annoyed Ben S in testing by making sure Militant exiled everything. He's like, why do you keep doing that?
1 card.
Because that's what it says.
Yep.
If we'd wanted to put it in the bin, we'd have said that instead.
Exactly.
These Pro Tour champions, they're so picky.
But the reason you do that also, though, is at some point that it does matter. You want to be...
Yeah, I mean, in the
you
Pro
want that
Tour, you do have to
repetition.
exile it,
Yeah.
for sure. So doing it in testing is just a good habit. Also, I like annoying Ben S.
So does...
Basically, Wescoe can cash in his voice for a token and 3 life, but it looks like he's going to avoid doing that for the moment.
Your turn.
takes 8.
And another land. It looks like we might be going to another game unless Wescoe's next draw step is very good. Yeah, like an Advent or a Trostani or a Courage there would have been pretty strong, but looks like a Temple Garden or a Plains will not do the trick.
So the battalion trigger of Frontline Medic says that when you attack with 2 other creatures, they are indestructible, which is, you know, kind of tough to block.
Yeah, it makes it so it's not difficult to decide what to attack with. The answer is just basically everything, and let the other guy figure out how he wants to block it. So,
But it's also worth remembering, if you're a Craig Wescoe fan, that in order for Josh to win this game, if he does do so, there was 7 power of creatures in play on turn 2, followed by a Frontline Medic, followed by your man seeing nothing but land.
Oh, yeah.
all those things are true.
Which was a lot of bad things to happen from the Wescoe side of the table to put himself in this scenario.
And
He just drew a Boros card.
yeah,
believe
Viashino
that
First
was-
Blade. So he's just deciding whether it's lethal or not, whether to slam the First Blade, because he hasn't actually shown Wescoe the First Blades either, and it might be worth not showing him
interesting.
those. But
That's super bold, though, when you're in an I mean,
Yeah.
I would be
Well-
hats off if you're prepared to not play a Viashino First Blade for that margin when you are facing elimination in the top over Pro
yeah,
Tour.
also he doesn't know that Wescoe's on 3 land. If Wescoe has an Advent of the Worm or Druid's Deliverance here, this game does look very different. Though Druid's Deliverance is less likely, because if he had one, he would have blocked with the Voice last turn to make a token. I mean, he could have just drawn it, but Josh is trying to figure out all the permutations of the blocks, because Josh doesn't want to die to a Worm token. That's his main concern right now. Though it looks like Wescoe would be 1 point short of killing him with a Worm token, because it evolves Experiment 1, but he would then get to block with Voice to actually make that not the case. So yeah, Josh would technically die to a Worm token if Wescoe had it, but so he's got to worry about that, even though Wescoe doesn't actually have it.
Looks like he's going to just commit everything to the board.
Yeah,
So in we go.
He's leaving one guy back to not die, basically.
Okay. Decided it was better to leave a burning tree adversary back
go there.
than to play a Viashino first blade and
Yeah.
post-combat.
4-4. 4-4.
So the first blade's 4-4, 3-2 Gorehouse Chainwalker, 2-2 Burning Tree Emissary, 3-3 Frontline Medic. They're all indestructible because of Battalion. And Wescoe is pretty much out of time because we know that those face-down cards on the left of your screen basically don't have a lot of good words on them.
They match the cards they're next to.
I'll block like that. So I take 6 and I get an elemental.
An elemental, one short of evolving experiment one.
So Wescoe now needs something very good.
And Josh has got to be happy that worm tokens are not on the horizon.
Yeah, Forest, isn't it? Now, you talked about earlier in the match about Josh playing on, even though essentially all hope was lost. Wescoe sitting there looking at 4 land in hand. Does he scoop them up here, or does he, again, play a land, pass the turn, watch what happens?
His 4 untapped lands represent something, right? He
Yeah,
can-
certainly. I mean, even though he didn't have it last turn, so he pretty clearly, Josh still has to respect it this turn, and that might buy Wescoe another turn. Not sure if he can even get out of it after that, but
Right.
there's really no reason to scoop here.
Yeah. Utter-Leyton doing the math, working his way along. That first blade's now back to a 2-2.
Sends everybody.
2-2, 3-2, 2-2, 3-3, 2-2. All indestructible once again. Thanks, Battalion.
The 2/3 power creatures have to get blocked.
And then it's Wescoe's choice of the 2 power guys to leave him at 2.
Yeah, so I guess if he could draw an unflinching courage and then have Josh forget to attack the next turn, he might have a shot. Yeah, he's even losing a bunch of creatures.
Game 4 on the way, for which Craig Wescoe will be on the play. And we have yet more. Josh is almost off the screen.
Wow.
Craig's drawn another land.
Yeah.
And he's going to say, I'm just going to show you that I had
You've got to go
nothing."
for the full reveal there.
just in case you thought I had something.
He says, sadly, I still had all these.
So that's another way you could potentially win.
Yeah, I forgot the all lands.
Yeah,
I was
just
expecting, you know,
the 5 lands,
just
1
the no
spell,
land.
draw steps.
Looking to face a greater challenge? Take your game to a Grand Prix and see how you fare against the best players in your region, as well as top visiting Magic pros. Upcoming Grand Prix include Guadalajara, Gothenburg, Providence, Houston, Bangkok, and Las Vegas. For more information, visit wiz.com/Grand Prix. So looking forward to Modern Masters in Las Vegas. Gonna go and play. It's gonna be great. But we are heading towards people who are still playing for the highest stakes in Magic. It's Pro Tour Dragons Maze. Welcome back to the booth. Rich, BDM, Luis, gearing up for what is still, still a chance for Josh. He's still in there fighting. More turn 2, Burning Tree, X.
Certainly, and even though the matchup is one of the hardest I've seen in a Pro Tour top 8, I mean, again, we're still talking about Magic here. It's still going to be well within the bounds of winnability.
Right. You know, we have a lot of creatures in that last match. Let's have a palette cleanser and take a look at a different card type that's been very important on the Esper Control mirror matchup.
Would that be the terrain land type?
This would be the Jace Architect of Thought.
All right, so we're going to head down. You see Jace Architect of Thought there, the mythic rare Planeswalker. Defends against attack as it really does, and provides a mini Factor Fiction. You get 3 cards rather than the original 5.
Rank the 4 Jaces, Luis.
Well, Jace the Mind Sculptor is, I think, by far the best. Jace Bellerin is actually the second best just because of how cheap it is. I think Architect of Thought is, at this point, third, though it's very, very close to Memory Adept. They both serve different purposes.
Okay.
So we are going to take you down to the back semi-final. And this is going to be Makihito Mihara against Dusty Ochoa. There you see them.
And there you'll see a Jace Architect of Thought in play for Dusty Ochoa.
Which is kind of good because he is 2-1 behind right now.
Oh, and
My guess is it's not for very long, though.
big moment here as you arrive.
big blue fireball has hit the table.
Yeah, I think if Mihara bricks here, I would not be surprised if he packed it up.
Yep. There you go. Oh, no, I thought that was him. That was him scooping up his cards.
That was Dusty picking up his graveyard to put a Jace in it, but Mihara's on, he's hell-bent at this point, so...
Not where you want to be.
Not where
with
the
an
blue
Esper
player
control.
wants to be.
No. And so,
And in
eighthly-
case you're wondering what Dusty Ochoa has to work with here.
Oh, okay. So that's double eighthling now. Smash in.
Yeah, theater.
This is overwhelmingly over and heading for game 5, which you will see right here.
For Rich's favorite joke, in case Makihito Mihara has anything, Ochoa has Dispel, Dispel, and Dispel.
Which spell and which spell and which spell? Exactly. So there you are. It's 2-2, which means we've come at the right time to take you to a decider to head in to the final of Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. Now, I can tell you that right now, the final slot in the World Championship is still up for grabs. Because the deal was coming in that if 7 of the 8 players won this Pro Tour, that would be their slot. But if Josh Utter-Leyton went on to win Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, it would create another at-large slot. Now, of course, Josh is still alive, 2-1 right now, and he has the chance, if he wins, then the slot would go to Makihito Mihara. So Mihara is still playing here for a final slot. He's also playing for Josh Utter-Leyton to end up going further, would give Mihara a chance at that slot. So let's take a look at the 2 player profiles here as we wait for game 5. And we have Makihito Mihara. He is 31, a gold level pro, though not for much longer because he'll be platinum. I believe he goes platinum. I think he's platinum now, in fact, for next season as a result of his minimum 20 points.
Yeah, I believe he had 25 coming to the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
How do you not? I mean, where do you put 4 Pro Tour top 8s? He's got a win at the World Championships against a pretty stacked top 8 field.
Nassif and
Paulo.
Paulo.
Yeah, just ridiculous. 5-time nationals. He's a team world champion. What are you going to vote for him in your Hall of Fame ballot? Is he in the mix?
Yeah, he definitely is now. The 4th Pro Tour top 8 is a huge dividing line for me.
You said the team was arguing about that kind of.
Yeah, we had some pretty nice discussions / arguments because we've got a lot of pretty good candidates in the mix this year, and now that Mihara has a 4th Pro Tour top 8, along with a lot of other impressive achievements, potentially a Pro Tour win here. We'll see about that in a few hours. I think that anyone who doesn't actually consider him is, I think, overlooking a very good candidate.
Right. Would you ever not vote for someone who had 2 Pro Tour wins?
If those were their only 2 top 8s, I think that would weigh heavily, but I would actually have to see what else they had done and how, kind of like who they were. It's hard without context.
I think part of the reason that the 4th Pro Tour top 8 is so significant is if you're feeling crotchety, you can look at the first 3, and in fact, never mind that. Let's get back to the game because they are underway. We'll talk more about Hall of Fame as the day goes on, but we're into action. The players shuffled very quickly and got down to action in game 5. You've got Mihara on the left.
Keep using that word action.
Yeah, look at that land. Look at it go. There it is, into play.
Mihara looking for a white source, it looks like. Though he's got some time. I mean, things don't progress very quickly here.
He does have some nice Zendikar islands.
Yeah, missing of his 4th land drop is really big, though.
Yeah, he drew a precinct captain instead of a way to cast a precinct captain that he didn't want to draw. He now has a 4th land, but again, no white mana.
Dusty does have a lot of lands in hand, which is very good, but could also lead to a situation where you can actually flood out every now and then.
Sphinx's Revelation for Mihara. So now he's at the point of essentially having to either cast something or just discard.
Take a look at what David Ochoa has in hand to work with. Just Dustin Ochoa. I am automatically. It's been very confusing.
Yeah,
D. Ochoa.
Actually, his hand is very ideal. It's got a Jace and 3 counterspells and a bunch of land. That's if that's basically the hand you would choose to get if you could.
So he wants Mihara to blink, as we've talked about, make a
Yeah.
play a counter, and then untap and get his Jason to play with.
Well,
the
if
ability
Mihara
to
keeps
protect it.
discarding, Dusty is going to have have enough lands in order to play Jace with counter backup, which will generally be good enough.
Land number 6 for Dusty.
But he's in no hurry. There's no reason to start a fight when Mihara's just discarding.
And there we go. Mihara just plops that Plains into play. See, that was action, BDM. It was a Plains.
So I think we're going to see a Sin Collector here.
Yeah,
from
drawing a
Justin
Sin
Ochoa.
Collector is pretty big. This is one of the crucial cards.
Take a look at the cards Mihara is contemplating. He's got a Syncopate, a Faraway, a Psychic Strike.
He can't successfully syncopate it, so it looks like he's just going to Revelation for 2 in response.
And Dusty looks like he's
Now
preparing a
it's Dusty's
no
turn.
sir. There it goes.
You-
Sorry about that. And now Mihara will reveal a significant hand which you can see on your screen, but Ochoa will do the hard way of actually looking at the cards one at a time. Double Sin Collector, Syncopate, Faraway, Psychic Strike, Sphinx's Revelation.
I
and
believe that Sphinx's Revelation is actually
That's the one
not
that's
been
just
X'd
got.
out of his hand yet by the
Yeah,
tool.
And the Debtor's Pool.
There you go. Now his hand is accurate. Another card is about to get X'd out.
most likely the Psychic Strike or the Syncopate. I mean, far away is not really something you're worried about. It looks like he's going to go for the Syncopate. Leaving Mihara pretty far behind, especially since Dusty's just got, again, Jason a bunch of counters in his hand, which is kind of where you want to be.
This would be a terrific performance if Dusty Ochoa can overturn the might of Mihara. 3 mana for Sin Collector, no. We see an Aetherling and a land hit the graveyard as the secondary ability on Psychic Strike.
There you see what taking the Syncopate over the Psychic Strike did
Yep.
for Dustin Ochoa, because the Syncopate would have been able to counter that.
Yeah. And now he gets to slam a Jace, which is certainly not what Mihara wanted to see.
There it is.
And with no pressure on him, he gets to just flip over cards.
Yep. Likely grabbing a Revelation here.
Yeah.
Not too tough on that one.
No, I'd have got that one right, I think. Are you laughing because you don't think I would? Mihara draws. Now that was a Jace the other way.
Yeah, I mean
That's decent.
is kind of what he needed, though. He's gonna have a pretty tough game ahead of him. Just the fact that he's behind on mana and cards and board position is kind of not where you want to be in the control mirror.
Yeah, he's getting outlanded 8-5.
Yeah, that alone is pretty tough.
But you worry about what you need to worry about, and then you worry about the other stuff later.
Yeah, so now he's basically deciding whether he wants to drop Sin Collector or Jace. Thing is, dropping Jace, you can actually wait a turn. It looks like he's just passing with Psychic Strike up, I guess in anticipation of countering Revelation, though that's not quite going to work against a hand of a Dispel.
So the Sin Collector continues the beat down.
Not for much longer.
No.
Nope, looks like.
I just wanted to show you this. You know
Yeah.
it's in my hand.
Oh, and now another pass, still not enough, not more land coming for Mihara. Remember, he only has 1 white source, so Precinct Captain's still dead.
Yeah, looks like Dusty's trying to figure out how to cast this and still end up protecting it.
Because we know he's...
Dispelled up.
Yeah. Yeah, just got to go for it, even though he's fairly sure it won't
so
be all
leaves
that
enough mana
successful.
up to pay for Dispel and Syncopate for 1.
Yep.
And it's Dispel that says no.
Crucially, he just gained 4 life also.
Well, it didn't get him over 24, so it doesn't actually.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
an irrelevant life total.
Looks like we've got quite the game here on our hands here in the other match as well.
Yeah, I can just tell you on the off-screen, Josh Utter-Leyton has got 5 creatures onto the board. He's turning most of them sideways. He's 13-12 is the life total, but he is looking in pretty strong shape against Craig Wescoe. Maybe we're going to have another game 5. If we do, of course, we'll hold that one for you. But here, this is all about Dusty Ochoa. Can he hold his nerve? Because he's holding the right cards.
Sin Collector, I believe, took a far and away there.
Yeah, I think this game might be ended on the hands of Sin Collector once again.
Yeah, I mean, really, one of the best cards from the Dragon's Maze set. How far-reaching can this card's impact be?
It's pretty significant. I mean, it's going to see a good amount of play in Type 2. It's going to see, obviously, a ton of play in Block. I'm not sure. It might even be a modern playable, depending on what like Nalira pod decks look like.
Right.
We're having a fight over this one. Sin Collector, Syncopate, Dispel, Syncopate.
Yeah.
Alas, Mihara will not be collecting for the Sins.
Yeah. Again, the guy with 10 lands in play is usually going to win the counter wars.
And Ochoa sends in the double Sin Collector. The writing is on the wall in this one. Any moment, I think Mihara is going to realize that he is done. He's going to run out of Jace, Architect of Thought. Oh, and the other semi-final has just finished, and Craig Wescoe is through to the final. He wins by 3-1. He had Druid's Deliverance on the critical turn, and that sends him through to the final. So we could be moments away from knowing the finalists here at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, because Ochoa is in complete control here over Makihito Mihara.
Yeah, he just resolved a revelation for 7.
Makihito Mihara definitely needs a toil and trouble and a fork here.
Yeah. I think Dusty has more cards in his hand than Mihara has cards.
Permanence cards.
Yeah.
Graveyard. Just taking 2 every time he plays land.
Yeah.
So out we think is going to come yet another Jace, Architect of Thought. Mihara says sure. This is done, and so is Mihara. He is going to come up short here, and we have Josh Utter-Leyton not winning the Pro Tour, and that means that the 16th player in the World Championship will be either Craig Wescoe or Dusty Ochoa, assuming that he continues to put Mihara to 0.
I think Mihara's most likely chance of winning this game is Dusty casting a Revelation for like 15 and decking, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Mihara draws yet another spell. Blood Baron of Wescoe. Is that going to resolve? It doesn't have to. Dusty says, yeah, and because it doesn't have to, I'm going to choose for it not to.
Mihara is still battling.
Yeah, he has one more draw step in his Pro Tour Dragon's Maze future.
We've already talked about him being kind of unflappable.
Yeah, well, certainly can't fault him for that.
And I'm just going to take a look.
Yeah.
There's the handshake. Dusty Ochoa advances to the final. It will be Dusty Ochoa against Craig Wescoe for the final of Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. And Ochoa, he came here, well, you know, he didn't have a huge amount of expectations. He just wanted to see what he could do. And what he's done is get himself to the final. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the booth. Rich, BDM, and Luis. So, Luis, your first reaction to what we've seen in the semifinals?
Well, the Wescoe matchup went kind of as expected, unfortunately for Josh, with Druid's Deliverance and Unflinching Courage and Worm Tokens taking it home. The Mihara match was a close one, and in the end, even though I did like the chances of Precinct Captain on Nightveil Spectre, when you don't have the early pressure there, then those cards are actually not great to draw in the mid-game.
And it did come down to what you talked about, which was that idea of who's going to draw the most land, like who's, you know, which control deck is just going to be able to hold out the longest before having to pull the trigger on something.
The person who has the least amount of land generally has to play something first because they can't just sit there and discard, which is what ended up happening, and then the other person can just counter it, play their own Jace or Sin Collector, and that is kind of how things ended up.
And Sin Collector really defined that matchup, right? That was
Definitely.
Okay, so let's take you down to the floor. Rashad Miller is with one of our finalists. It's Dusty Ochoa.
Here I am again, Rashad Miller with Dusty Ochoa. Seems like we're always talking to each other at these things.
Well, if I keep winning, I guess you're going to have to keep talking to me.
So we just found out that Craig Wescoe was going to be the other finalist in this tournament. So he's playing the green-white Selesnya aggro deck. So how do you think you feel about your matchup there?
Much more confident against that deck than the red deck, so I'm pretty happy about it.
Very confident man right here. Doesn't even need to test, as we found out last time. But we're going to send it back to the booth to Rich BDM and Luis Scott Vargas.
I have a feeling Craig Wescoe may be horrified to find he's playing a green-white Selesnya deck. I don't think that's true at all, Rashad.
The deck is very green.
Yeah, but in Craig Wescoe's heart, it's a white deck with some unfortunately necessary green splashes.
Well,
Fortunately, we don't live in his heart. We're out here in the real world.
It's got 9 forests and 9 plains. It has an equal amount of both.
That's true. All right, so Dusty Ochoa there, completely unflappable too. You can see how he did manage to take Mihara. I wanted to ask you, though, both of you, I haven't seen a lot of the Esper Mirror this weekend, partly because I haven't had several hours spare. But one of the things, just from what I have seen, it's very hard to see where the skill edges are in the mirror. So what should I be looking for when I'm starting to play those decks on Magic Online? What should I be thinking of as the turning points? I get that Aetherling's amazing if I have it and you don't, or that I have a Jace, I win a Jace war, if you like. But where are my skill edges?
I think the biggest decision points are like when to break the stalemate and go for something, how to use your syncopates. One of the plays that comes up a lot is syncopating for a non-lethal amount, like an amount they can pay. Because if they do pay, you can then resolve an Aetherling or something along those lines.
And we also saw people, bluffing a syncopate, right?
Yeah.
Knowing, playing a land untapped, even though it costs them 2 life on turn 2 to buy time.
Yeah, just the way you play your lands is important. Like figuring out when you can play a tap land and when you can't in order to leave syncopate up for various amounts is pretty important.
Right, and we watched also a play where he took a syncopate over a psychic strike, knowing that his opponent wouldn't have the mana to psychic strike him when he did something else on the next turn. So It's all about sequencing too.
Great stuff. Well, we will be back for the final in just a few minutes. But until then, the players are going for a short break, prepare their thoughts, prepare their decks. We'll be back for the final. But for now, let's take you back to the news desk and the team of Zach Hill, Sheldon Menery, and first, Marshall Sutcliffe.
Thanks, Rich. Marshall Sutcliffe here at the news desk. Hi, Zach. Hi, Sheldon. Hi, you. Okay, so we've got 2 left, Craig Wescoe and Dusty Ochoa. So talk to us a little bit here about how this matchup may go. We have kind of a control versus aggro, kind of a classic Magic clash here.
This has been happening in Magic since the ancient days. You have a Wescoe wants to win fast, and Ochoa wants to win slow. I mean, that's really it is. He wants to keep Wescoe from winning fast, and once Wescoe can't win fast, I think Ochoa has the upper hand. But I mean, Wescoe built this deck coming in here knowing exactly what he was going to face. So this was kind of a really, really good metagame choice for him.
Yeah, and you can actually tell that. One of the ways to figure out what a deck is good at, bad, and doing is looking at its sideboard. And if you look at Wescoe's sideboard, he's got 4 Tristani Celestia's Voice, 1 Gift of Rojava, 4 Unflinching Courage, all devoted to beating aggressive decks.
Yeah.
That must mean he probably thinks his control deck matchup is pretty good coming out of the gates. And if you look at his deck, you see why. Judge is familiar, really good against the instants and sorceries the control deck's going to use to get back in the game. Great mana curve, Experiment 1 Dryad, Militant able to come out really fast. Voice of Resurgence, we've seen punishing control decks all day. And 4 copies of Rootborn defenses that answer the best weapon against him, Supreme Verdict, with value.
Yeah, it's like answer with upside. So who do you like here, Zach? I mean, the way I'm seeing it, Craig Wescoe looks like he has a pretty solid advantage given the fact that he seems, I mean, I'm not going to say pre-boarded, but 4 of those, like that's pretty, 4 Rootborn defenses is a lot in the main, right?
Yeah, it's a huge amount.
Yeah.
And we've seen, 1 or 2 copies in some of the more mid-range decks. I think it's just easier for Wescoe to keep open 3 mana because his curve is so much lower.
Okay, let's take a look at the bracket leading up to this point, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Dusty Ochoa's list and how it matches up. So on the top bracket there, we had Craig Wescoe, and he faced down Andres Prost in the quarters, and as we know, he was successful in getting to the semifinals there. Andrew Shrout versus Josh Utter-Leyton. Josh beat Andrew, I think it was in 5. We had a lot of game 5s out there today.
Yeah, we did.
On the next one was Rob Castellan, and he was playing against Dusty Ochoa. Dusty, with his Esper control-less, was able to get by Rob, even though Rob really had a great run here this weekend. Congrats to him. Makihito Mihara beat Mate Zadokai, our co-worker, to advance. So that set up a real slugfest in the top bracket. Craig Wescoe, white-green aggro versus Josh Utter-Leyton, white-red aggro. But it looks like Craig was able to get through. You predicted that, Zach. You said that the tools were there for Craig to enter the finals here, and that's exactly what happened. On the bottom bracket, it was Dusty Ochoa versus Makihito Mihara in an Esper mirror match, and I believe that also went to 5. Dusty Ochoa advancing to the finals against Craig. Okay, so Zach, you've been looking at these deck lists. I just made a prediction that I thought Craig had the edge here. If A, do you agree? And B, what tools does Dusty have to fight?
I think that I would say Craig has the edge, but I mean, Dusty also, we're talking about being pre-boarded for matchup. Dusty main decking, for Syncopate, counters not necessarily as great against Craig's low curve, but those are the counters that are probably best in the aggressive matchup. He's not main decking Psychic Strike, for example, so I think that, could be worse for him.
Okay.
He's got, 4 Supreme Verdict, 3 Far and Away, 3 Devour Flesh, 4 Azorius Charm. Azorius Charm, bad against Voice of Resurgence, pretty good against everything else, especially obviously Advent of the Worm tokens because it gets rid of them permanently. And Devour Flesh, a great way to fight through those Rootborn defenses from Craig, because even if your creatures are indestructible, of course, you're still going to need to sacrifice them.
Right, the life gain basically irrelevant from Dusty's side of the table.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're certainly not winning. I mean, you are winning through damage, but you're winning through damage in a way that's dealing it in chunks of 8 or 7 from Obsidat. So.
I think one of the keys cards for Ochoa is going to be those Far and Away. I think that there's going to be a lot of value there because the Supreme Verdict is going to get blanked a couple of times.
Right.
It's just going to happen, and sometimes you have to play the Supreme Verdict even if he's only got 2 creatures on the board, an Advent of the Worm and a Dryad Militant, and that's still 7 damage coming your way. You have to Supreme Verdict. If he can use the Far and Away, is going to be much more effective in that situation.
Yeah. Now, one thing that you might not expect out of this matchup, Dusty has 4 copies of Sin Collector out of his board, presumably for the control mirrors, but I think they might actually be really valuable in this matchup as well.
Yeah, take a look at some of the cards it hits.
Yeah, it doesn't hit that many targets, but the ones it hits are big. Advent of the Worm, huge.
Yeah.
And the curve works very nicely for that. It also gets Rootborn defenses out of his hand to set up Supreme Verdict, and even though you have to lose your own Sin Collector, you're still getting 1 for 1. Finally, you can hit Celestia Charm if they're tapped out. Again, you're not siding it in to deal with Celestia Charm, but it gives you another target to make sure you're not casting a 3-mana 2/1.
Yeah, he's also, Craig also has Call of the Conclave,
right?
Which kind of plays into the Sin Collector and also is a nice target for an Azorius Charm as well.
Of course.
So there are a few weaknesses here on Craig's side as far as how the matchup actually pans out. It seems Loxodon Smiter, pretty nice against a deck that runs counter spells, though we don't expect those to be in for long, right? Like, I mean, how bad does Syncopate get if your opponent's playing 4 Judges Familiar? Is it like, get it out of my deck, or do you still run it?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't like it very much in this matchup. I might have a couple because it's a good answer to Advent of the Worm, but I mean, the fact that it doesn't hit Loxodon Smiter, which is like one of the Craig's most expensive threats he's going to cast on his main phase, makes me think you want to get it out of the deck as quickly as you can.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. Now, if we're going to see, if Dusty is going to win, what are the main sideboard tools that he has to fight against Craig Wescoe here?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, I think you want that 4th copy of Devour Flesh.
Sure.
Again, you don't really want Craig sacking Voice of Resurgence, but Voice of Resurgence is just really good against you anyway. You kind of have to own that and say, all right, well, this card's in his deck. It's here for a reason.
Yeah.
Let's work around it.
Well, you'd rather give him one token than a bunch of tokens from that
Totally.
Get rid of it now and go, oh, okay, one elemental's battling me instead of, I've just cast 4 instants and now I have 4 elementals in my face.
Right, and you just have to stop the bleeding. I mean, he's got 12 1-drops that can attack you. You're going to have to kill him somehow. So I think you want Devour Flesh to be sure. I don't know if you want 4 Sin Collector. You probably do. I think you want at least 3. Again, because if you don't have a plan against Rootborn defenses, like you don't really want to bring in Dispel. I mean, it only hits that and Advent of the Worm. It's not like the worst sideboard option, but if you bring in too many cards like Sin Collector and Dispel to deal with Rootborn defenses and Advent of the Worm, then you're not going to be able to deal with his curve of 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop creatures, which for all we're talking about this strategic analysis is his deck's primary plan. He wants to cast guys, he wants to attack with them.
Right.
So I think you want at least 3, maybe 4 Sin Collectors. You want the 4th, or I think the 4th Detention Sphere. Is that? No, okay, only 1 Detention Sphere.
You
anyway,
want the
you want it.
Detention Sphere, yep.
Yeah, I mean, not only is it just good, is it a removal spell, it also deals with Craig's best draws. So, like, a lot of the time, he's going to want to draw, like, multiple copies of the best cards against you. It can get you out of that. Also deals with Voice of Resurgence very nicely. So yeah, I think he's going to want his Detention Sphere. In terms of what he sides out, I think we talk about Syncopate, not that exciting. I don't know that you need 2 Obsidian, 2 Aetherling, and 2 Angel of Serenity. They're all very, very good, but they're also all very, very expensive, and you might not want to die when he gets to that point.
Obsidian and Angel of Serenity being really quite good versus Craig in the sense that Obsidian helps get you back out of life and also provides a huge blocker if you decide not to blink him out. Angel of Serenity, awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you're definitely wanting to, if you can cast that, it's probably going to win you the game. It does get hit by Craig's Celestia Charms.
Both of those creatures do.
Right.
Yeah, so that could get a little bit awkward. Now, Aetherling, a nice win condition.
Totally.
Do you leave it in
I think you do.
As a huge blocker and just a factor on the game state?
I think maybe I stay alive long enough to drop my Aetherling. I really don't want my Aetherling to be a blocker. I want an Aetherling to be an attacker, and I want to be doing 8. So I think part of Ochoa's plan is to stay alive long enough. So after sideboard again, the Sin Collectors, because not only do they take a card out of the hand, they block and trade with something. They trade with the Dryad Militant or something. I'll stay alive, draw some cards, deal with your threats, and then by the time I have 7 or 8 mana in play, here comes Aetherling, and you're in a pile of trouble.
All right, I have a question for you on this one, Zach. I see that there's 2 Vidu Ghazi Guildmage in the sideboard for Craig. What are those for?
When I was talking to him earlier, it's basically just anytime you think the game is going to get drawn out, you want to make sure your 2-drop, it attacks and blocks for 2 like normal, but you want it to be a threat that you can just take over the game with post-board. I think it does probably come in here. You probably don't need all 4 Celestia Charms. You want enough. I mean, you want to make sure you can deal with an Obsidian or deal with an Angel of Serenity, but you really want to kill your opponent before they get to that point. So you might swap out like 2 Guildmages for 2 of those, or 1 and 1, something like that. Civic Saber, really good. Actually, it turns more of your cards into relevant threats.
Into individual relevant threats that prevent you from having to commit more to the board than you'd feel comfortable.
Right, because they don't get hit by a verdict.
Right.
So, I mean, I think you might just do that straight up swap. But in general, I think Craig's going to be presenting his main deck and saying, like, this is essentially pre-boarded.
Yeah. I mean, we saw, what you mentioned before about all of the slots that are dedicated to keeping him alive in an aggressive matchup. There's a ton of there's even True Druid's Deliverance here as well. So he's got a ton of stuff. Glaring Spotlight, does that do anything in this matchup?
I mean, you could sort of use it to blank a removal spell, but I think you're principally using it in like green-white mirrors to just force through an attack. So I don't think that's what you bring
to get through Reckoners and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other big question for Dusty, Azorius Charm, again, not awesome against Voice of Resurgence. One of the things is, though, it may just be conceptualized as a part of the mana base. Like some of these decks, it's hard to figure out. Like you just don't want to trim cantrips. In other environments, it's like really tempting. Like, oh, I don't need a Serum Visions here. Oh, I don't need a Thought Scour here.
Can you talk a little bit about what that does to his mana base having for Azorius Charm?
Yeah. So essentially, being able to play 4 copies of a 2-mana cycling card. By cycling, just one of the modes is draw a card. It allows you to sometimes play 1 or 2 fewer lands than you would play otherwise. I haven't played Dusty's deck. I don't really know whether it's part of the mana. Maybe you use it to kill an attacker most of the time, and so that's the mode you think of it as. But something you have to be careful when you're building a deck like this. You're like, okay, Charm not awesome against voice, not awesome against 1-drops. I want to bring it out, and then you're just like, oh wait, I now can't draw enough lands.
Right.
So something you just have to bear in mind when you're playing a deck like this.
Okay, now one of the cards that we've seen in these Esper decks that has had a huge impact on the matches here in the top 8 and throughout the course of the weekend has been Jace, Architect of Thought. Is it at all important in this matchup, and if so, how much?
I think it's incredibly important. A lot of the players I've been talking to have been saying, like, I'd love to play 6 Supreme Verdicts if I could, but I can't. But on the 4th turn of the game, you need to be able to stem the bleeding from the aggressive decks. Jace still does that. It turns all these 1-drop, 2/1s, or 3 power creatures, sometimes in the case of Experiment 1, really halts their damage. Of course, the more creatures your opponent's playing, the more creatures they're committing to the board, the better Jace's +1 ability is.
Sure.
The other thing is, if Craig's holding up Rootborn defenses, sometimes you actually want Jace instead of Supreme Verdict, because Rootborn defenses doesn't really do a whole lot against Jace. Now, if he has a token, sometimes he can cast it and make sure to kill Jace on the counter attack. But I mean, also Jace is just one of your principal card advantage engines. You just have to get ahead. So
yeah, this deck has mainly 2 of them, right? Sphinx's Revelation and Jace, and having half of those in play or whatever is going to be a big advantage for Dusty if he can get it. Also, it just draws a lot of attention.
It does.
I mean, because I'm looking at Wescoe's list, and there's a few cards that it blanks. There's Judge's Familiar, mainly Experiment 1, but we know that Experiment 1's going to be bigger. What it doesn't do is there's Loxodon Spiders, there's Call of the Conclaves, Voice of Resurgence, it's fairly effective against there too, but Advent of the Worm tokens. I mean, sometimes Craig's list just produces very large threats, and Jace is a little more marginal against those.
I've seen Craig play a couple times this weekend where an opponent had a Jace in play and hadn't used its first ability, and it was drawing cards with it. Just bypass it. I'm not going to let you use it as a fog. I'm just going to battle you, and I'm going to make you draw into your answers. Go ahead and do your mini fact of fiction. I'm just going to damage you.
And the other reason that's relevant is if you kill Jace, you actually make the other Jaces that your opponent may be holding live.
Right.
So if you can play in a way that you just don't really care about what Jace is doing to the board, you actually can blank some of the cards in your opponent's hand. I mean, you look at the list, and I mean, it's easy to say, like, okay, Dusty plays Jace, not very good as Craig can just cast Advent of the Worm and kill it, cast Rootborn Defenses and kill it. I think all that's true. I think Jace is not as effective as it could be in other matchups. The thing you have to remember too, though, is that Craig only has 23 lands, and his curve is actually reasonably high. I mean, like Smiter is at 3, Rootborn Defense is at 3, Advent of the Worm is at 4. So Craig is not necessarily going to be able to cast his 4-mana spells when Dusty is casting his 4-mana spells. So if Craig's draws stumbled a little, I think Jace, shrink your team, make sure I can untap safely, puts Dusty in a really good position, even though if you're looking at the list on paper, it may not seem that way as much.
Another thing I want to ask about here are mana bases.
Yeah.
Craig is dealing with a straight 2-color mana base. It's pretty straightforward for this block environment. But over on Dusty's side, he is in 3 colors. Playing a Godless Shrine on tap, that can add up pretty quickly. Guildgate's tapped where he doesn't get to play a spell that he needs to on turn. How big of a factor do you envision that being? I mean, is Dustin's deck mana-wise significantly slower enough to make it an issue for him?
Oh, it's definitely significant. I mean, Craig doesn't have as much reach as some of the red-based aggressive decks do, or particularly the Boros decks. But I mean, you're still paying a real cost by taking all this damage. I mean, Craig has a ton of basic lands. It means he's going to be able to hit his curve when he needs to. I mean, you can pay life on your dual lands, but something that we've seen in the feature match area several times is if you get a draw with multiple gates and you're the Esper deck, sometimes that can really slow you down. It's not as bad if that's what you're doing on turn 1, turn 2. When it's bad is if you need your 4th land for Jace's Supreme Verdict and it's a gate. That can be the game right there.
Which is what we saw that happen to Mihara there in that last match.
Yeah. So this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup, I think. Now remember, up to 4 of these games are going to be played post sideboard, and it looks like the boards are. I mean, we noted that Craig Wescoe's deck seems to be heavily skewed towards beating an aggro matchup. He's got a couple of reasonable inclusions, but it doesn't seem like any of these are really blowouts against what he's going to be facing. I mean, I think a lot of times, you might expect to see a root-borne defenses over here in the sideboard,
exactly.
but it's part of the main deck. It's part of the engine that makes this deck go. And, we've seen on camera and also just wandering around the feature match area and out at the tables that Craig's deck can put up an immense number, just a sheer number of creatures in a real hurry.
Well, I think something to remember about Craig's deck actually is the list is just very good.
Yeah, it's like a super good. I was just looking at it. It's like 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, and then there's another root-borne defenses and a random Civic Saber. It's
really fundamentally sound. It's really redundant. I'm going through the list. I'm like, every one of these cards seems good or serviceable in every matchup.
Yeah.
Right. It's like Voice is insane against both aggressive and control decks. Dryad Militant, you're not thrilled to draw it against aggro, but it blocks and trades with all of their 1-drops.
Sure, it trades with with some of their 2s as well.
Yeah, Experiment 1 is bananas. Judge's Familiar, not only clearly for the aggressive decks, holds a Civic, for the control decks, holds a Civic Saver very well though, and also in the mirror makes your opponent have very small window in which they can actually resolve Advent of the Worm. So I mean I think it's easy to look at Craig's list and just be like, oh, it's a green-white aggro deck, whatever. I think he quietly has produced maybe the best deck in the room.
Yeah.
And we're just not talking about the fact that it's just a really good Magic deck right here.
Yeah, and he's in the finals of a Pro Tour. I mean, with the deck that he built to bring here.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's a significant validation of the choice that he's made.
That's right. All right. I am told players are ready for the finals here from Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, so we're going to send it down there. Craig Wescoe versus Dusty Ochoa. Rich, BDM, and Luis, take it away.
All right then, gentlemen. Let's see if we can get it right this time, shall we? Luis, who wins the final?
I'm going to go with Ochoa.
BDM.
Ochoa.
Ochoa. Let's see if we're right.
Castellan.
Stop it! It's time for the final of Pro Tour Dragon's Maze 2013.